Welcome to The Unusual History of Everything, the podcast that uncovers the unusual history of everything around us. I'm Karen Lacey.
And I'm Melanie Dulles. On this episode, we show you how ancient Chinese medicine became the inspiration for medicine shows and rattlesnake wranglers.
If you've ever heard the term snake oil salesman, then you're probably well aware of its negative connotations. If you haven't, let us give you all the details. The late 19th and early 20th centuries saw the rise of men who touted the medicinal benefits of mystery medicine they claimed would cure any ailment from cancer to a cough. But this mystery medicine usually didn't contain any ingredients that cured. Rather, the masses were taken in by snake oil salesmen who would put on a show complete with actors pretending to be cured after taking the elixirs.
The term snake oil salesman became synonymous with con men who sold fake medicines to people who believed their slick tongues and wily sales and marketing strategies. Con men who promised all of your ailments would disappear, take your money, and be gone by the time you realized the medicine was nothing but mineral oil and camphor. There were so many of these men by the mid-1900s that writers and movie producers added them as characters in American Western movies and books. And the first usage of snake oil salesman was in Stephen Vincent Bennett's poem, John Brown's Body, in 1927.
Oh my gosh, that's also a song that my mother taught me when I was a kid.
Wait, what? What is John Brown's Body?
It's a song.
Let me hear it.
John Brown's body has something upon his head.
Are you serious? Wait,
I'm not even kidding.
Let me see if that's the words.
Yeah, find it because I remember it, but I don't remember it. I actually sang it the other day.
Okay, I found it. John Brown's body lies a smoldering in the grave. I don't even know if that's the tune, but that's the words.
No, that's it. That's the tune.
Lies a moldering in the grave.
Yeah.
But his soul goes marching on.
Yeah.
What? Your mom sang this to you?
Someone did, but we had some different words, but I know it's from, I always knew it to be from, knowing now that it's probably from the Civil War.
Yeah, this is not, by the way, the same thing as the poem.
No. But I just remember John's brown body.
John Brown. That song's by Pete Seeger, but it's funny because whoever John Brown is, like he works its way around. I bet the poem John Brown's Body was inspired by the song because the song would have been first. Because I think the song is Civil War origins because I think it has to do with dying and being a soldier. The song is, but the poem that mentions snake oil salesman is about John Brown, who was a radical abolitionist. He raided the federal armory at Harper's Ferry in Virginia.
Yes, that's where it is. Okay. Oh my gosh.
Thank you, Goodreads.
Oh my gosh. I'm going to have to ask my mom what the original song was that she used to sing because
they're both about the American Civil War, though.
But I don't remember it being like super dark. I just remember it was like
she
like maybe
made it sound happy.
Like maybe it was like John Brown's body had a cross upon his head. That doesn't sound right though.
That's not
it. That's not it. You know what though? Lyrics change through time and over with families. Yeah, it was John da 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 da.
The stars above in heaven are looking kindly down. I don't know.
No, and I think there's another.
They hung him for a traitor. So it's about the same dude, but the song is written by Pete Seeger, and the poem is written by Stephen Vincent Bennett.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, got it.
There you go.
Both about the same guy.
They are. I'm gonna have to ask my mom.
One is a nice
because I know,
nursery tale song.
I know. Well, I mean, many songs come down through families, and they lose their original meaning and connotation.
I've never heard that.
Oh, there
were
oh
so funny that your mom sang that to you.
There were several songs that my mom sang to us when we were kids. And when I kind of grew up and I was like, oh my God, that is an awful song. Like there were several songs. One was I didn't realize that my mom was teaching it to us thinking, oh, that's a good song that she was taught. And it had some really dark connotations. Like there's this one song that I didn't realize, but it was about working in the fields, like picking cotton. And we loved that song. It was just this really light tune, but it's a working song. And it was like, you kind of go backwards and you're like, oh, wait, that's a song that people were singing when they were slaves in a field. I'm like, I really shouldn't be singing that song.
Well, and you know, what about like Ring Around the Rosie?
Or
all
Ring
the
Around the
plague
Rosie
songs,
so
all the
many
death
songs.
and your mom is like making it all happy.
Right? I know.
Like, oh,
And so many nursery rhymes, like,
Yeah.
the song that still gets me. And we did the podcast about it is the one where the bough breaks and you're like, your baby is falling from a tree and we're still going to sing about it and that's going to put them to sleep.
That was a pretty interesting podcast, I thought.
It was.
Because I never really knew where that came from. And just the idea that, you'll have to listen to the podcast, but it was pretty cool because it's kind of true. And we kind of talk about where it all originated from. And and the baby in the tree was, in fact, real.
So, dear listeners, I will ask my mom for the lyrics and then I will put the family's version that was taught to me. And maybe we'll even come back later and do a breakdown episode following up with this saying, what was that song that Karen learned when she was a kid?
I think that's a great social media video post with your mom singing it to you when you're in Texas.
She won't do
next
it
month.
But maybe I can try. All right. Well, anyway, how did all of this start?
We digress.
Let's go back to snake oil salesman.
Yes.
How did it all started? Okay. So, during the mid to late 1800s, 180,000 Chinese people traveled to America for new opportunities. Most came from poor families. Many of them came because of the gold rush and kind of things like that. And since many white men were not applying for places like the Central Pacific Railroad, they began hiring Chinese workers to build the Transcontinental Railroad. And at one point, when this was getting built, their workforce was basically like 90% Chinese laborers. And I just think that's just crazy because they don't really get a lot of that credit when you're really kind of reading about that story and that narrative about the Transcontinental Railroad. But anyway, they weren't given much money. The hours were really long. The work was really hard. And their bodies quickly became sore and tired. Fortunately, they had all brought ancient medicines used for various sicknesses and inflammations of sore joints. And one of these medicines was snake oil.
The Chinese people have used and still use snake oil from the Chinese water snake to reduce inflammation due to arthritis and bursitis. They would rub it onto their joints to feel relief, and since using it is a common practice in China, the relief of the railroad workers would have been immediate. However, if they were new to using it, relief wouldn't come for 6 weeks to 6 months, depending on the person. The relief they felt was due to the omega-3 fatty acids inside the water snake, which was 20% icosapentaenoic acid, or EPA, which is what I will be calling it for the rest of this podcast. And EPA is one of 2 fatty acids used by our bodies. In comparison, salmon only contains 18%.
A neurophysiology researcher in California named Richard Kunin was the first to examine the connection between the Chinese water snake and its omega-3s back in the 1980s. But it wasn't until later that American scientists figured out that omega-3 fatty acids were important for cognitive function, blood pressure, cholesterol, depression, and making sore muscles better. But back to the late 1800s and the railroad workers, there were Americans working on the project as well, and the Chinese were more than happy to share their snake oil with their fellow laborers.
It wasn't long before word spread of the magical cure they had found in Chinese snake oil, and people all over were clamoring to get some. Most tried making their own, but Chinese water snakes could not be found in America, and so people tried using rattlesnakes with poor results. Enter the slick-tongued salesman/con man who saw an opportunity and jumped on it. Not satisfied with making snake oil that only relieved sore muscles and joints, these men decided to sell it as a cure-all for everything from headaches and kidney problems to female troubles.
Yes, and these small elixirs were known as patent medicines, which were prevalent in medieval apothecary windows. Medieval patent medicines were filled with herbs seeped in liquid, and no one ever knew what the ingredients really were, as they were sold as secret healing tonics. The first one was called Turlington's Balsam of Life and was said to have 27 secret ingredients that, according to a booklet published in 1747, quote, gently infuses its kindly influence into those parts that are most in disorder, end quote.
So patent medicines became popular once again with the help of snake oil salesmen in America. Many of these salesmen claimed to get their secret recipes from Native American healers who did use rattlesnake grease to help with arthritis pain, even though, according to Kunin's research, rattlesnakes only contain 8.5% EPA. Despite the low amount of omega-3s, snake oil salesmen decided that was good enough and began using rattlesnakes in their marketing schemes and medicine shows.
Medicine shows were very elaborate marketing and sales tools for these conmen. They consisted of music, puppetry, acrobatics, and all the acts you would see in the sideshow carnival. Of course, the main event was the quote-unquote healing demonstration the snake oil salesman put on for large audiences. People would be lured in with promises of remedies and miracle healings. As they sat in wait, the rattlesnake wrangler would come out dramatically holding a rattlesnake and explain to everyone how he would extract its oils, make the cure-all, and demonstrate it on a sick audience member.
Of course, the sick audience member was a plant, someone who the con man chose and paid to pretend to be sick and magically cured. But after watching the entertaining and dramatic demonstration, everyone believed, and the snake oil salesman's elixir was sold by the crateful. Likely the most famous of the rattlesnake wranglers was a man named Clark Stanley, a former cowboy who claimed he got his recipe from a Hopi medicine man. He became famous for the scene he caused at the 1893 World's Expo in Chicago.
Stanley walked onto the stage in a colorful outfit holding a sack filled with rattlesnakes. To the amazement of the crowd, he reached into the sack, wrestled for a few minutes with the deadly snakes, and pulled one out with one hand and slit it open with the other. He then immediately put it into boiling water that was set on the stage and waited for the fat to rise to the top, skimmed it off, and used it on an audience member of his choosing who was immediately cured of whatever they were suffering from. He called it Stanley's snake oil, and it was an instant hit with the amazed and enthusiastic crowd.
The problem with Stanley's snake oil was that, despite the theatrics, it didn't contain snake oil. In 1917, federal investigators seized a shipment of the product and ran some tests. They found that it contained mineral oil, fatty beef oil, red pepper, which warms the skin, and camphor, which gives it that medicine-like smell we all know and love, but no snake oil. When it was announced to the masses that they had all been had, snake oil and its salesmen became connected to fraud and fake cure-alls. And Clark Stanley, well, he was fined $20 for violating the 1907 Food and Drug Act. But don't worry, you can still find real Chinese water snake oil in most Chinatowns in America.
And I do have to add, I don't know if you know the history of this one too much, and we're not going to go into it here, but many of our sodas that we still drink today started out with some of their history rooted as like a snake oil salesman kind of elixir.
Oh, and they had like Coke had cocaine in it.
Yeah,
right?
Coke had cocaine in it, and it was initially...
we should do a whole podcast
It was
on
initially this like cure-all or whatever for all of these different ailments, and it was like, it's because it has cocaine in it, you know, and all this other stuff, but then slowly but surely it became a drink.
Well, some of these elixirs, these magic cure-all elixirs that we're talking about, like they did, like some of them later on had, I think, like opium in it and like certain
cocaine, opium,
like
and like
enough
aspirin.
to make you feel really good, but it wasn't curing anything.
No, but it had some element in it that made you think that, like, you could put aspirin in it and it would, you know, cure a headache, and there, or you maybe like joint pain, you'd be like, oh look, it works, you know.
Exactly.
And it's really funny though, because if they had the Chinese water snake, then it actually would have worked and been this amazing elixir. So
it wouldn't have been a cure-all though. They were trying to sell
that's
it,
true.
Marketed as like it'll
it
cure
wouldn't
anything,
have been a cure-all,
but they would have at least
it would have cured a lot of things.
It would have cured a lot.
So all they needed to do was go over to China and get the Chinese water snake, and it would have actually been more helpful, but too expensive, I guess, because rattlesnakes were a lot easier to come by.
Yeah, and they felt like rattlesnakes were vicious and like the most deadly of all the snakes.
Scary.
So it was probably, it's like we're using the most venomous, vigorous, horriblest snake.
See, I think water moccasins are worse than rattlesnakes personally, but that's
boa constrictors, I don't know, all of them.
There's a whole history with that. Me and snakes. So. That brings us to the end of our episode. You can follow the Unusual History of Everything podcast on Instagram at The Unusual History of Everything and on Facebook at The Unusual History of Everything podcast. Find our show notes on www.musecuratorial.com. The Unusual History of Everything is written, produced, and directed by Melanie Dellis and Karen Lacey.
New episodes air every Tuesday on all podcast outlets. Be sure to subscribe to us so you never miss an episode and leave us a review. You can also see photos from our episodes and more on our website, Instagram, and Facebook. Thanks for listening. I'm Melanie Dellis.
And I'm Karen Lacey, your host for The Unusual History of Everything.